It is here. The Apple iOS big update has dropped, and a lot of people have questions. Okay, so we have different videos on specifically what to do, like how to verify the domains. And many of you already know that, but a lot of people are asking, why exactly is this happening? And what specifically is happening? And well, there's so much information out there that is it because of the Apple update, Google's going to get away with tracking cookies? What's this conversion API? We have to verify a domain. Is that all because of Apple? No, there's a lot of stuff going on here that if you're advertising on Facebook, just listen to this video. I wanted to make an intro here really quick just to let you know I'm going to add in some little clips and highlights, but essentially this was a question that we received on our open office hours inside of our Belt Premium program. What we do is inside of our different training programs, we offer office hours. That's when you can show up live and, this is my favorite part, ask questions with very specific distinctions. Like, why does this work like this, Kurt? Or what happened when this? And what about? And these key distinctions can make huge differences in your marketing. So we've taken this audio from one of our most recent Premium Belt Method members from inside of office hours, and with their permission, we've edited this small portion. It's about 20 some minutes long that's really going to dive deep into this whole Apple tracking. What is it? How do you explain it? Because when you understand the history and the why behind it, you know exactly what to do next. So the video that's going to play here is actually a recording from, like I said, inside of that call where we turn off our cameras. So I'm going to add in some extra video. But if you just want to go ahead and take your phone, if you're listening on YouTube or on Facebook or on our website, you can drop your phone right on in your pocket and just listen away. Let us know if you have any additional questions. And if you haven't already started taking us up on our Fast Start program, no matter what your skill level, we can get you started with the Belt Method program right away. All you have to do is go to thebelt.live. That is thebelt.live. It is really that simple. And by the way, if you've already checked out our Fast Track program, get inside of the Premium program. Or if you want some one-on-one time as well too, we do offer that. These distinctions can make a huge difference in your business and your business of your clients. So listen up to this Apple presentation. It'll explain a lot of what's going on right now. Let us know if you have any additional questions. We are here to help you out and support you. Can't wait to see you on the other side.
So, question for you, Kurt. That's you're probably going to feel like a broken record. You've probably answered this a million times.
That's right.
I am invested in the Apple iOS update not being a big deal. And so, I have customers calling me and like, is Facebook over? Do we need to jump ship? And so I'm of course invested in being like,
all great propaganda questions, right? Because they're watching the news, scared of it. They have no idea what's going on.
Yep. So I'm like, use the Belt Method and you'll be fine. I mean, that's kind of what I'm telling them. Yep. So am I being a good salesperson?
How deep do you want to hear this? You want me to start?
I want you to go. Yeah, go deep.
So basically, from a really high level view, let's start about 30,000 feet, then we'll go 20, 10, tell you what's really going on. I'll make the story pretty short, but easy to explain to your clients and whatnot. So the 30,000 foot view is take Apple out of the equation. Tracking's changing overall across the internet. Basically, they found out that these tracking cookies that people use, well, I want to use tracking cookies so I know what you did on my site. You want to use tracking cookies to know what I did on my site. That's just the two of us. Thousands of sites that people visit nowadays, there's tracking cookie nightmare. Well, Safari a couple of years ago basically said, we're just going to do away with these tracking cookies. We're just not going to allow people to track like this. That was a couple of years ago. Well, not a lot of people use Safari, unless you want Facebook to load fast, and then I use Safari. That's the time I use Safari. Firefox. Well, Firefox blocks like a couple billion third-party pixels every single day, which is ridiculous. Well, now you have Google. Well, Google allows pixels and cookie tracking right now, but the Chrome browser is going to get rid of cookies next year. So no one's going to be tracking with cookies. That's the big thing, is we got to figure out different ways to track people. So take Apple out of the equation. This was already coming up. Apple just made a new splash. That's the big difference, right? So we start taking a look and say, okay, well, if we're not going to be tracking people by these third-party independent cookie things, because they can be used maliciously, again, it just overcrowds people's browsers, whatnot, litters the internet. So basically what Facebook has been doing for a long time is Facebook is like, okay, well, let's just create a walled garden. So we can see what everyone's doing inside a Facebook app. When they leave the Facebook app, it's going to be a little interesting, but we can figure that part out. And that is the conversion API, which I'll talk about in a minute. But it's like, hey, look, if we keep them inside Facebook, we can track pretty much anything because they have the technology to know that you're logged into Facebook. Now, following around on third-party sites is going to be a little bit different. I'll talk about that in just a second. So the first thing is tracking was already going to change. This has nothing to do with Apple. That is the 30,000-foot view. All right, so the next thing. Apple has a lot of money. I don't know if you've ever read any bios on Steve Jobs. He wasn't the nicest person in the world, just to be very open with you. So Apple's core principles aren't actually really that nice when you look at business principles. They're just not. But hey, they got a shiny cover that people stand in line for. So what basically happens is this. Right now, if you have an app on the Apple Store, Apple takes 30% of your revenue. That's just the way that it works. Well, the State Department and Justice Department here in the US is saying, hey, that's monopolistic. And you are pillaging from your customers. And Apple's like, well, where else are they going to go? So there's already a State Department investigating on like how much Apple's really gouging app developers. Well, the other thing that's kind of interesting on stuff, and this really goes into the whole kind of Apple philosophy, whatever, people have said great things about Steve Jobs. He was a visionary, blah, blah, blah. The other thing is he was a hoarder of cash. Billions. They have over $1 billion in cash now too. And people would say, well, Steve just never got a chance to donate to charity. No, he was a hoarder of cash. He didn't really give a shit about people. He gave a shit about money. That's what he cared about. And that's a philosophy inside of Apple. So Apple's already taken a whole bunch of money inside the App Store. Apple's already taken a whole bunch of money, which they really leaned into is iPhones, accessories. They've made a ton of money, but they can't get their ad platform down right. They've had a couple of different ad platforms, hadn't really worked. Well, everyone's moving to this, you got to be in a walled garden. You're inside the Facebook app, so Facebook's going to be able to track you pretty well. And until you go to outside sites, which we'll talk about in a minute. Google, oh, come on. You're logged into your Gmail, which is Google Maps, YouTube, blah, blah, blah. Like, they're tracking you in so many different ways. They're just inside of their walled garden. And they're like, we could care less where you go because everyone has a Google analytics code tracking Pixel on their site. So we pretty much see everything. So now you have Apple, which is like, well, we don't have a walled garden. We actually share this data with everyone. And then when you really start diving into it, you start looking at the apps. Well, Apple has a big reach on these apps. Well, the audience network specifically is apps made up of the Apple ID that's everyone's talking about. And that Apple ID allows people to serve, personalized ads. And what ends up happening is when you download a free app on Facebook, and Facebook's allowed to run that advertising inside of the app, that is that Apple ID audience network targeting. So what ends up happening is Facebook pays publishers 30% of any of the ad revenue traffic, kind of like AdSense. Okay? So I just want to make sure at the 20,000-foot view, Apple hoards cash. Apple is being looked at by the government because of their monopolistic views. And now where all these apps and the audience network are making a bunch of money with Facebook, Apple's like, screw Facebook, we'll just go ahead and take that money, and basically puts a wedge in between the app developers and Facebook for them to actually share in that revenue. So it's just like Apple's coming on in and being like, oh, that's cute. You guys are getting, let me get this right. People are downloading free apps, which we still get 30% of. And then Facebook's advertising in those apps, and Facebook gives the app developer 30%. And Apple doesn't get anything from that revenue, which it's another business model, but Apple's like, oh, I don't get any money from that. Okay, well, you know what? So Tim Cook comes out and is in propaganda. We are going to protect the users because that's what we do at Apple. We protect people. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and remove this Apple ID tracking, because you know what? We're actually going to ask people, do you want to be tracked by Facebook and third-party sites? So just to be clear, with a 20,000-foot view, we are in the walled garden. Facebook can track everything that's in the walled garden, video views, engagement, all of that stuff. Facebook can track all of that. Thing is when you start going outside of that walled garden, it gets a little interesting, which I'll talk about here in just a minute. But this is a great play for Apple to step in and take away a bunch of that revenue from Facebook inside of the ads, inside of the apps. Does that make sense so far? At the 20,000 foot view, Tom, are you still following with me?
Okay.
You good?
So the big part that I just wanted to clarify on is,
of course,
Facebook is running ads inside of these app developers' apps.
Audience network.
And so Facebook is giving those app developers 30% of
ad
what
revenue
they're getting to run ads there. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. So that's why you download the app, and there's things like in-app purchases. But you're like, when you download, like for a perfect example, whenever I ride my mountain bike outside, I always download Track My Run. It's a fitness app. Well, Track My Run is $15 a month, where I can get it free, and it just serves me ads all the time. And those are the interstitial ads. When I'm done with my bike ride, I hit pause, it says save, and then this thing pops up where it says, hey, save money, and blah, blah. That's an interstitial ad, which many of the times I'm like, no, I just wanted to save my ride. Exit, exit, but it counts as a click. That's why you see so many clicks come from these audience networks, because it's kind of a bunch of junk ads. So one of the reasons I tell you this whole thing is what ends up happening is most of your sales and leads aren't coming from the app network, from the audience network anyway. So turn that off. Just get out of it. A lot of times what will happen is people will be running in-stream videos, and it goes to this audience network reward videos, which is you're playing Clash of Titans or whatever. You get to level 3, and you can either pay $3 to get extra jewels or wait 30 seconds and watch these 2 ads. People are just clicking on the ads so they can get rid of them and not have to wait 30 seconds. They don't care about your brand. So we just uncheck audience network, right? Number 1. Now that doesn't solve everything. But here's the deal. Remember, let's go to the 10,000 foot view. This is only on mobile. This doesn't have anything to do with desktop. So it's only on mobile. Now, most of your traffic is going to come from mobile, okay? But here's what ends up happening. We're just talking about straight up adoption. You take a look at your mom, your grandma, your uncles, aunts, whatever. Most of the time, our family is not standing in line waiting for the latest iPhone so they can get the latest technology. Those are early adopters. So yes, people are getting notified now that says, hey, do you not want to be tracked, or update to 14.5, whatever. The rollout of adoption is probably going to take 8 months. Like me, for example, I've been in technology. I work for Microsoft and I've worked for Apple directly. And I've always learned that when these new software updates come out, a lot of them are really buggy, and it takes a couple of weeks to kind of figure stuff out. So when it says, hey, Kurt, do you want to download this new app, or do you want to download the new version of? I purposely wait 2 or 3 weeks, because it is a very standard practice in the technology area. Hey, we have a deadline. There's a market coming up. We have to roll this out now. Don't worry, we'll fix it later. So no one really knows what's going on right now. And not everyone's updating their phone. So it's not Armageddon, the sky is falling. These are early adopters that download it. And then this is slowly starting to get rolled out. And then we're going to go down to the 5,000 foot view about the education part of it. Any questions with these distinctions in here so far?
Okay, so one thing, and this is really helpful, is when you're talking about the walled garden. So let's just say, which I already hear you debunk this, but let's just say every single person that has an iPhone updates today, it goes into effect. That still won't affect video views, post engagement,
correct?
Lead forms. We're really talking about website pixels and in-app stuff. Is that what I'm hearing?
Correct. So let's change the language just a little bit for the pixels, right? What Facebook's basically saying is they're like, hey, everybody, install this conversion API. And a lot of people are like, I don't even know what that means. Facebook's like, oh, it's really, really easy. You just have to install this code. Well, I mean, you just have to hack some different code. I mean, we have developers that can do it for $10,000. Wait a minute. This is an easy upgrade you want everyone to use, and it costs developers $10,000? I mean, Tom, you've worked with some customers before. Just getting them to add the regular pixel to their page is ridiculous. $10,000 in dev? So Facebook comes back to us and says, hey, look, Kurt, Steve, my brother, we'll give you guys $10,000. We'll give us, but any of your clients that qualify, we just fill out this form. Facebook's going to set up this conversion API. Now, what the conversion API is basically this. Right now, we rely on Facebook to tell us what's going on third-party sites. That's the Facebook pixel. We install the pixel on our site so Facebook can track for us our website. So right now, people can engage in the Facebook app. We can retarget that. Facebook gives us a pixel so Facebook can track that activity. Cookies can track that activity when people come to our site that we have the pixel installed on. Does that make sense so far? So Facebook's letting us borrow their pixel, and they're sending us data because we put their pixel on our sites. Does that make sense?
This is new, or are you saying this is what the pixel's always been?
That's what the pixel's always been. Facebook's basically like, hey, look, we got this walled garden. You can retarget video views, but if you want to retarget something on your website, you're going to have to put our pixel on your website so we can cookie people, and we know who's been to your website, so we can tell Tom who bought, who became a lead or whatever. That's what happens right now. Now, the conversion API basically is a little bit different. It is Tom owns the information. So when someone comes to Tom's site, that's Tom's information. Tom now gets to decide what Facebook sees, not the other way around. See the Facebook pixel, Facebook shows you what they want you to see, right? The conversions, whatever. When you install this conversion API, this is what they were giving us $10,000 for, because essentially you own your own pixel now, but we're not going to call it a pixel because it's not a cookie, it's a conversion API. So what you're going to do is you now are going to be the data holder with the conversion API. You then will tell Facebook when the cookies go away what data you want to share with Facebook. So it happens as that, like a 2,000 foot view, this app pops up that no one knows about, right? Or the warning pops up and says, hey, would you like to opt out of third-party tracking? People are like, hell yeah, I don't want advertisers to track me, so they opt out. They're opting out of the Facebook pixel, essentially, on our website, right? But Apple says, hey, look. We know that commerce still has to work, so we're not going to let people opt out of the pixel completely. We'll give you one conversion. We're just going to anonymize the data so much, you're not going to be able to figure out anything personal about these people because Apple protects them. But when people do one event, that's why we have the prioritization of events. Apple's like, all right, I tell you what, if you do have someone who opts out and you want to fire currently, the Facebook pixel will let you fire one event. That's the prioritization of events. So Apple is letting you fire the pixel, but it's only allowing you to record one conversion event. Does that make sense so far?
Yes, and their other workaround is that you're the one who's tracking them, not them. You're just sharing it with them.
So
that's kind of their workaround too.
I want to be really clear on this and really specific because I'm really specific on language.
Yes.
It's not a workaround. We are solving the problem of cookies going away with Google, and people complicate it and feel, oh, this is because of Apple. No. I told the story of Google first. So the conversion API, we create our own sandbox. That's what that is. Because now that we have our own sandbox, the conversion API, we can track what people do on our site. And then we get to tell Facebook or Google what information we get to send them. So Facebook's going to have a walled garden that we can retarget the activity there. When people come over to our site, it's now going to be our responsibility in the future to report what data we want to track. We are our own walled garden. We are going to pass that data, conversion API. We're going to pass that data off to Google and Facebook. So Facebook will have its own sandbox. You'll have your own sandbox for your website. Google's going to have its own website sandbox. Pinterest has its own sandbox. Twitter has its own sandbox. So yes, it's not going to be the matter, in my opinion, of, hey, Facebook's just easier to get up and running. Now that everyone has their own sandbox, if you really want to connect them all together, you really kind of have to run ads in these different networks. So at a 1,000 foot view, Apple already has all this data. Apple's looking to create their own sandbox so you can advertise on their network. That's the thing. So this tracking update is not, hey, it's going to ruin Facebook ads. It's just like, hey, look, Facebook used to allow us to track everyone. They put their pixel everywhere. We track everyone. Now everyone has to have their own sandbox. So it's all siloed off. And I'm going to have to control my own data. And that's what people are going to have to get used to, which is just like when they first had to manage email accounts. It's like, I don't even know how to do this. It doesn't make any sense. Like, it's going to take a while for people to adopt to it. And right now what's happening, at a very kind of ground level view is there's a lot of developers scrambling because, again, Google's going to get rid of these cookies. So they have to have the conversion API, and it has to be super easy for your clients to set this up. And they're trying to figure that out right now. So last thing, I'll answer any questions here to kind of wrap this up. The thing is no one's really done this before where they've taken away the tracking. But the thing is, I don't know about on your side, we're actually seeing cheaper leads. We're seeing some better click costs and stuff like that. And again, this is very early. We're only talking 2 days in. But the whole belt method is still going to work. It's still propaganda. If you were to do direct response and that was the only thing you relied on, I'd be a lot more concerned. But because we're actually building a rapport with people, no, we'll just be in the different walled gardens and we're good to go. Thoughts, questions? What you think, sir?
Okay, so 2 follow-up questions, and also this is awesome. I appreciate you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the first issue that came up, not just from Apple but from all of them, was the website pixel, and so the solve of that is the conversation you had on the conversion API that solves that. Am I?
Yep. So we have to be in the control of our own data going forward.
And that's the new code. That's domain verification. Is that what that is?
So that's part of the process. So the domain verification, basically what's going on. So you have some really great questions, sir. The thing is, it's just 20 things that are happening at once. And like conspiracy theories, for example, are rationalized by people to explain things they don't understand. And that's what a lot of things happen here. Like there's no conspiracy theory with Facebook, but because so much happening is all at once, people are like, oh my goodness, what about? Domain verification is actually 3 years old. Domain verification actually came around right after the presidential elections to verify that you own the domain so you can edit any articles that are running usually in the political space. So there were so many domains set up, Russia and whatever was setting up a ton of domains, and you wouldn't know if it's like your local whatever, like your local group of blah, blah, blah. And you're like, oh, this all looks local and everything else. And they could just manipulate it. So Facebook's basically like, nah, we're going to make you verify the domain, kind of in a very loose way, is when you sign up for a Google domain, they're going to make you have an address and a name and an email on file for the main administrator or register. That's kind of what Facebook's looking for. So a couple of years ago, Facebook started to get in the domain verification. So domain verification doesn't have anything to do with Apple or Google. It has it to do with figuring out who owns what websites online. That's what Facebook's doing.
So, okay, so if that's part of it, then is the final completion choosing your top custom events? Is that once you've done those 2 things?
So basically, kind of jump back to the story where we were at like a 10,000 foot view where Apple basically says, hey, look, we're going to take away all your tracking. And Facebook's like, so you're going to take away all tracking and you're just going to ruin commerce. So people are going to buy stuff and we'll never get it recorded, which tracking's not 100% perfect anyway. Just remind the clients of that. So it's not like anything's really going, kind of away here. Apple can't take away all tracking because these algorithms just wouldn't work to go find people, and like small businesses could really get hurt by this. So Apple's like, all right, I tell you what, right now, Facebook, you track, like right now, I track in my funnels when I set up the golden ad report. Oh, they went to view content. Then I know they hit a landing page. They hit view content, or collectively, right? People hit view content. The next step is they clicked on the button at the bottom of my page. I put that add to wish list. Now they go over to my sales page, another view content. Now they're going to add to cart, they're going to initiate checkout, and they're going to purchase. So we are going to be able to tell, okay, what are the track of where are people going, right? What buckets are they falling in? What hops are they going into? What Apple basically says is we're not going to allow you to track people's activity. And I think Facebook's argument is like, well, what's anonymous data? We're just seeing 100 people took these different steps. And Apple's like, nah, someone could reverse engineer and figure out personal information about these people way above our pay grade, in my opinion. So Apple's like, okay, I'll let you report back on one conversion. One. Facebook's like, what do you mean one conversion? Well, we'll let you prioritize that at 8 of them. If you're 8 different things, what do you want to track most to least? We're going to allow you to track that. So for example, you may have, I want to go one domain, then 2 domains. So one domain, let's just say it's standard e-commerce, right? Which you're going to have a view content, add to cart, initiate checkout, and purchase, right? Super simple, super simple. Well, you may prioritize purchases at the top because it's not really important to understand the view content, blah, blah, blah. You just really want to see purchases show up. Well, you may have a webinar where maybe, you get 500 leads, but 4 purchases. You would want your lead objective to be the top priority. So you may have 2 different domains. One domain that takes care of the funnel up to the leads, the next domain that's going to handle everything else up to the purchase. So Apple's allowing you to track one conversion point for the people who opt out. So your conversion API would help fix this because you would report what hops are in the funnel. So Apple's allowing you to track, but they're only allowing you to track one event. That's why you have to prioritize your 8 different events for each domain.
So if I'm planning for the future, I'm not thinking, oh, I better get out of Facebook. So I'm still prioritizing Facebook as my main media buy, but I should be going to maybe LinkedIn, Pinterest, and YouTube ads and learning how to create ads that get people to a landing page so I can get them into my main funnels, which are happening in Facebook. Would that kind of be the play you'd start figuring out how to do in addition to?
So a couple things there. One is if you're running straight up direct response, the number one goal is to get people over to your website and then retarget them, right, as much as you possibly can. The thing is with the belt, we start to take a look at other contact points like engagement, even across all the different other platforms, right? So what you may be doing is building engagement inside of the walled gardens. That's the number one priority. Building engagement inside of the walled gardens that is trackable. And this is an and, not an or, and then getting people over to your website so you can retarget them with your brand on third-party sites as well. So build that engagement on each of these walled gardens. And as you do that, people will come over to your website, and that's where you can set up retargeting for Twitter on their walled garden. You can set up retargeting for Facebook and Google and YouTube. So once you get someone from Pinterest back to your website, now they'll start to see everywhere.
Okay, so just to clarify,
go ahead.
Just to clarify on that, and I'm speaking a little bit, I'm reaching because I don't know those other platforms as well. So I'm hearing you say, hey, when you go to those other platforms, don't throw the belt method out. Just start going for the conversion objective every single time. Still run the equivalent of a video views ad or a reach ad or something that adds value without just trying to get a lead. Still keep having like a hot 28 going on these other.
Here's kind of a way to look at it with history. Okay. So what ends up basically happening in history is I always tell people follow the Monday morning memo from Roy H. Williams. He's brilliant. I post about it every once in a while inside of our premium group. So what basically used to happen in the good old days, early or late 80s, early 90s, is people would buy local. Let's talk about local. You'd buy radio, you'd buy TV, you'd buy newspaper. The reason is because there's only two really newspapers that people would typically read in the city, maybe 3. There's really, if you can remember this, there's really only 3 or 4 TV stations on, and at the time, this is before cable and everything else, and Netflix and everything. And then typically people are pretty religious, pretty steadfast, pretty traditional in listening to the same type of radio channels. So what you could do is you could really saturate a market back in the day by advertising in those 3 mediums. So you would advertise radio, you would advertise newspaper, and TV, and you would get a really good saturation. So a lot of that's direct response. There's actually no retargeting in what I just talked about there. It's just overall market saturation of the message. Well, in 2000s, early 2000s, start moving on ahead of 2010, Netflix comes around, cable comes, cable was around much earlier than 2000s, but cable comes around. Now what ends up happening is you're not listening to a radio station, watching the TV, local TV station, just reading the newspaper. You are all over the place. You are listening to Pandora, you're listening to Spotify, you're on Netflix, you're looking at YouTube. So that market saturation just doesn't get there. But you can create the same type of market saturation by showing your ads and engagement at each one of the walled gardens, getting people back to your site so when they go to any of these walled gardens, they start to see you. So it used to be we could invest in these 3 different mediums and we'd get saturation. Now with so many different mediums of people consuming content, we have to create that medium that people are starting to see us everywhere because of our retargeting. Does that make sense?
Yes. And so you want to make sure that you're doing that on all the other platforms. You're retargeting or the equivalent of retargeting on those other platforms.
Yes.
And not just trying to generate leads.
Correct. Because you're basically, when you create a walled garden, each one of these platforms is going to allow you to retarget, certain types of content, engagements, whatever. And then you're going to be responsible for collecting the clicks for your conversion API that you're going to retarget. And then, of course, you want to be creating your own walled garden with leads, text messages, list goes on and on. So you have better reaching content. But just moral of the story all boils down to what I tell your clients is, number one, sky's not falling. This is just an update in technology. And there was no such thing as retargeting back in the 80s or 90s. We didn't have any problem, right? And plus, you don't even know how to track billboards, phone calls anyway. So it's not a huge issue. And as things change, we're just going to have to be more responsible for our own data versus Facebook being responsible for the data. That's it.
Awesome, Kurt. Appreciate
Cool.
the heck out of you. As always.
Absolutely. Happy to help.